Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here at the Almond Conference, kicking it off. Thank you for joining our session for the first session of the day and of the Almond Conference of 2024. We appreciate you guys all being here. My name is Michael Roots with the Almond Board of California. I'm part of the Field Outreach and Education team that gets the pleasure of working with growers on a day-to-day basis. And I also have the pleasure of being able to pull together a panel that I hope you guys all find useful. I know that we have growers from all over the state, from different regions, from different types of operations, from new almond growers to second, third, fourth generation growers that are all trying to do their best to farm almonds in the state. We understand that times have changed and continually change, that things aren't always easy, from regulations to price to input costs. And we also know that water availability is always at the top of that list of priorities for you guys. We know that the SGMA outlook is very different depending where all of you guys are from. And it can be a challenge to track that, but we've really pulled together a group of experts that are able to kind of give you guys all some ideas of what you can do in your operations to continue succeeding in farming almonds, as well as looking at other practices, looking at funded programs to help put some land into fallowing, to groundwater recharge, and a grower to kind of pull that all into perspective of how you guys plan to look at your operation now and going into the future, specifically in the water space. So I really just wanted to welcome you guys. I wanted to introduce the panel. We have Mike Wade with Farm Water Coalition. We have Mike Tietze with East Turlock GSA, Anya Radabau with Western United Dairies. We have Joe Tropparena with Sustainable Conservation and Brett Sill with Sill Properties, who's an almond grower. So they are the experts. I'm just here to introduce them and have them really share their knowledge in a very wide array of areas that I really hope you guys are able to listen to them, to get the knowledge that they're here to share and really think about how you can operate and introduce these things into your operations, or a mix of them, and how you see them, these practices and programs being useful in your operation. So I will get started with our first speaker, Mike Wade. I will invite him up here.
I haven't said anything yet, so hold on to your applause. I'm Mike Wade. I'm with the California Farm Water Coalition. We're a nonprofit public education organization that's been around since 1989, 35 years. And our mission is not lobbying. It's not anything like that. Our mission is to educate the public about agricultural water use and the connection between farm water and our food supply. And so I've spent 26 years here at the coalition and seen a lot of changes, some dramatic changes in how our water supply is managed, changes in how laws and regulations govern our water supply. And I want to lay a little bit of groundwork today, laying groundwork for the rest of our excellent speakers, but also starting with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, is probably the biggest water management challenge or change, if you will, that has occurred in the state in 100 years. But it came about as a result of things that happened 100 years ago, and even more than that. If you track California's water use and agriculture, it goes back to the early years following the gold rush, when some of California's earliest water rights were formed, first in time, first in right, in mining. And it translated into some of the early water rights that are still effective today in terms of agricultural water use and how we allocate water, and with senior and junior water rights and things like that. A lot of the miners that came to California were farmers in the Midwest and in the eastern states, and they came out here to strike it rich, right? They came out here to make a fortune mining gold, and unfortunately, not everybody did that. They had challenges like everyone, and found that they weren't going to make it, but they didn't want to go back to the Midwest or to other states either. So a lot of them continued on their the vocations that they had. They remained farmers, and they decided to continue farming in California. And it started out as a dryland farming state and evolved over time due to a variety of reasons to irrigated agriculture. And as we approached the turn of the 20th century and the advent of turbine pumps and the ability to pump groundwater, we saw 100 years or more ago some of the first groundwater overdraft in the state. And areas southeast of Fresno were in danger of going out of production because of groundwater overdraft, the loss of groundwater. That led to the development of the federal and the state water projects and some local water projects that had their early water rights in 1887. And with the transition to these bigger water projects and delivering surface water to irrigate land, we found we were able to overcome this groundwater recharge and keep land in production and farm it for 60 or 80 years sustainably through the development of surface water supplies. That changed with some of the well, I want to say environmental laws, but every time you say that, it sounds negative. And I don't mean to sound negative, but our changes in social values, our changes in the way we want to manage our resources in the late 80s and early 90s started to draw that water away from agriculture. And we've seen a tremendous change since that time in reallocation of surface water supplies to service environmental demands. And so what did farmers do? They didn't fold up their tent like the farmers after the gold rush didn't go back to their states. Farmers found other ways to do this, and they returned to groundwater pumping, and they did it in a big way. There's no question that there is unsustainable groundwater pumping in many parts of the valley, and by the time the 2012 through 2016 drought rolled along, the climate was right, the political situation in Sacramento was right, and the public opinion was right in the effort to pass SGMA, or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in 2014. So let's get going here. The act itself was actually 3 legislative bills, SB 1168 and SB 1319, along with AB 1739, collectively became the act. And we all know what it did. It said that by 2040 or so, we have to have sustainable groundwater management in the state in all subbasins and all of the groundwater basins in the state. Governor Brown, interestingly enough, around the same time when there was a lot of criticism of agricultural water use, I think broke the back of the public opinion and media attacks and agricultural opponent attacks that farms use 80% of the state's water. The governor around this time came out and was at the Colusa Farm Show when he said that agriculture, he said, in California, we use 50% of our water to protect the environment. 40% goes to agriculture and about 10% goes to urban use. And it helped, I think, soften the blow for agriculture in a sense by getting a lot of the criticism off the back of farmers and let us have a free runway ahead to start working on ways to implement SGMA. But around 2014, 15, 16, I don't think a lot of people really understood the long-term implications of what that act was going to do to irrigation and to farm production in the state. So the act authorized the formation of groundwater sustainability agencies and provided them with new powers to manage groundwater and to become essentially a taxing entity, to charge fees for groundwater, and to allocate or manage the groundwater sustainability plans and all of the irrigated land within their basins. The current status, we've got dozens and dozens that have successfully submitted plans. There are a few that are still hanging out there waiting for approval, but I think some changes are going to happen, and there's a recognition to find ways to get those plants operating in every subbasin. And I believe SGMA is going to be successful in the sense that it's intended to manage groundwater, but I think it's going to have some significant impacts on agriculture, which we'll talk about shortly. The groundwater management agencies were given this control and oversight, and I know many of you, probably everybody in this room, farms in a subbasin that has some kind of new controls that didn't exist pre-2014 when the act was passed. And some of the things I've heard as recent as last week that people that are farming in and that are managing some of these subbasins believe that there needs to be kind of a recheck, kind of a go back and look at SGMA, see what's working, see what's not working, and find ways to amend it or find ways to improve it so that it's having the beneficial effect on groundwater and on our ecosystems, but then not having these detrimental effects on agriculture that seem to be more and more prevalent these days. My last two slides here, I think, are really where our organization comes from. And we understand the whole reason behind SGMA, and we support its goals and all of the efforts that are underway. We believe we need to have sustainable water management in the state. But we don't think that this is serving the state or the country's needs as food policy. California is the largest agricultural state in the nation. We produce more crop value in California than the other 49 states combined. We're all here at the Almond Conference. We understand how big the almond industry is in the state because the state's conditions are so great for growing almonds. But we're seeing, at the low end, a potential of 500,000 acres of fallowing in California as a result of SGMA, on top of many other regulatory issues, the Endangered Species Act at the state level and the federal level, and some of the new operating procedures that are being negotiated and approved that will require additional cold water pool in Shasta Reservoir, for example, and additional flows in the Sacramento River and through the Bay Delta to support ecosystem and water quality. And there are some really some big decisions that have to be made. The State Water Resources Control Board is on the cusp of adopting a new water quality control plan for the Bay Delta. And that could go one of several ways. Many of you have probably heard about unimpaired flows, either up to a 45% unimpaired flow on the San Joaquin River and its tributaries, and up to a 55% unimpaired flow on the Sacramento River and its tributaries. And that's water that would be required to flow to and through the Delta and out to the ocean without diversions. And that is not really the answer that we want to see for water management going forward. Healthy Rivers and Landscapes is an alternative that provides not only in-stream flows, but it provides habitat restoration and funding for the things that we're trying to achieve with the Water Quality Control Plan without devastating agriculture. But this is kind of where the rubber meets the road as far as we're concerned, and that's our ability to produce food in California. Since 1980, fresh fruit imports have more than doubled, and in the same time period, fresh vegetable imports have quadrupled, and they continue to climb. I mean, this is a scary graph when you think about the growing demands for food in not only California, but across the country, but our increasing reliance on foreign food production to meet our needs and to the way it affects the global market, and how more and more we're having to compete with other countries for foreign food supplies when less and less is being produced here in California. And we're paying more for food than we ever have. We've got a dependence on production, particularly from Mexico, where 70% of the fresh fruits and vegetables that are consumed in the U.S., or that are, 70% of the imports that we get come from Mexico, and they come from regions that are facing the same or worse irrigation sustainability issues that we're facing here in California, and they're doing it without SGMA, and probably some not too distant future where land is going to be going out of production there if the sustainability doesn't improve. So that's our concern. We've got other speakers on the panel that are going to talk about other ways to use land and land repurposing. And my hope, and I think from our conversations beforehand, is there are some great ways that we can continue to support agriculture through recharge and through other things that keep land in production and keep us being able to feed not only those of us in California, but others across the country. So with that, here's the Mexico chart, sorry. All these red areas in northern Mexico are areas that are unsustainably farmed at this point. And as I said earlier, is this our food policy? Is this what we want for our country? And my answer is, I don't think so. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was really to set the stage of kind of what everyone else is going to talk to. Now we have Mike Tizza with East Turlock.
I am Mike Tizza at East Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agency, so GSA. It's a mouthful, and it's a big task, big lift. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about our particular situation and what we're doing. It'll be different from what you're dealing with in different parts of the state, but there's a lot of commonality in terms of the challenges and what we're trying to do. So I'm going to talk specifically about integrated land repurposing strategies for sustainable groundwater management. I'll talk to you a little bit about our GSA. We're located in the northern San Joaquin Valley. We're one of two subbasins that is not considered critically overdrafted, in part because the irrigation districts in our area, Turlock Irrigation District, Modesto Irrigation District, and others, operate their own projects. For us, that doesn't mean as much, though, as we would hope. We're working collaboratively and have entered into a water accounting agreement with TID that's allowing them to make more consistent out-of-district deliveries to our area, which is very important, and we're really doubling down on making sure that we get as much surface water into our area or retained in our area. But the fact is that we're almost completely reliant on groundwater in our area, and there's not enough of it. So our GSP was initially adopted by the board in 2022. And early this year, we were told by the Department of Water Resources that it was incomplete. So we had 6 months in order to address certain deficiencies just around how are we actually going to turn around our declining groundwater levels by 2027, when we'll actually be below our what are called our minimum thresholds, which is defines our no-go zone, right? But this is early days, and we're just starting to implement our projects and management actions to get there. So a lot of what you're going to hear here is common to a lot of GSAs in the state. There's about 200 new regulatory and resource management agencies that have just been formed. And contrary to what I've heard some legislators say that they think SGMA is happening at a glacial pace, I find myself consistently out of breath and a dollar short. So just an overview, we're a joint power authority. We have 2 water districts that actually don't have any water. They bring as much surface water in as possible through other agencies, and they manage groundwater. And that's East Side Water District and Bilico Cortez Water District, which have been two very important components to really crystallizing our program. Merced Irrigation District has a small service area in the southern part of our GSA, and then we have what are called white areas, or Merced County and Stanislaus County. We have over 90,000 acres of high-value farmland, mostly in permanent crops, mostly in almonds, and our total area is about 140,000 acres, so we have some undeveloped rangeland in the east side of our GSA, and a lot of cattle ranching operations there. As I mentioned, little surface water available and almost entirely reliant on groundwater, so as a consequence, these are familiar looking types of maps. On the left you see a hydrograph, which is water levels over time in one of our key monitoring wells, and as you can see they go down from left to right. So our aquifers are highly productive, but they don't get much recharge, and we're having to come to terms with this overdraft situation. The horizontal lines that you see are our management thresholds, with the lowest one being an interim milestone that we're allowed to go to in 2027. The red line being a minimum threshold that we have to manage to stay above, and then the green one being our target for long-term management that allows us to fluctuate without going below that red line. So we have the heavy lift of turning around that groundwater with that groundwater level decline. So one of my favorite cartoons here on the left, how you view sigma really depends on your situation. And you know, I like to be optimistic, but I recognize that there's a lot of pain and suffering that's happening now, and that's going to continue to happen as we turn around these groundwater basins to sustainable management. I mentioned the water accounting agreement with TID. That's going to get us a substantial part of the way towards sustainability, but the lion's share has to be demand reduction or changes in agricultural practices, recropping, that allows us to decrease our demand by an estimated currently 40%. That's a heavy lift. Now, I caveat that by saying that the one thing I always tell people when I say this 40% number is that the only thing that we know for sure about it is that it's wrong, okay? And that's not dissimilar from most GSAs. Hydrogeology is an inexact science. As a friend of mine used to say, it's dark down there. And what we need to do is we need to start implementing what we can as quickly as possible. We need to get to the starting line so that we can determine what adjustments we need to make in the final analysis. So what we estimate is that we're going to have about 22,000 acres of land that we're going to have to repurpose to non-irrigated use. Land use changes of that scale, or 500,000 acres has been estimated for the San Joaquin Valley. That's huge. And normally land use changes of any kind of scale like that are studied up the wazoo and are mitigated and are carefully planned. And we are charging ahead, and what we want to do is we want to carefully plan and not have these adverse consequences, which are obvious economic, environmental, and social consequences if this is not done right. This is probably, in my opinion, so I guess from where I sit, the biggest quality of life challenge to the Central Valley right now, doing this right or not doing it right. So our guiding approach is integrated agricultural land use planning, and what we'd like to do is build a menu of options that growers can choose from and self-implement. We think that our growers know their business better than we do, and what we would like to do is offer them options that they can implement on their own, and that we can incentivize in order to meet our demand goals. We have other companion programs to the multi-benefit land repurposing program, where we received about a $9 million grant from from the Department of Conservation to get us started. 9 million sounds like a lot. It's not when you're talking about thousands of acres, but it's enough to get us started, and we're very grateful for it. So what we want to do also is adopt a balanced finance and incentive programs. The incentives are coming from us, from our local growers. So if we collect too much by way of fees from our local growers, the incentives aren't going to matter. So what we're trying to do is balance the two and also leave an option for growers to self-implement and leave incentives for them to self-implement to reduce their fees and increase their allocations if they want to do that, or to be incentivized by us to do it. So we're trying to put a number of different options out there. So I'm not going to go into detail on this, but this just shows that there are a lot of moving pieces to this, right? We need to plan for our physical projects for infrastructure to deliver more water where it's available. We need to put into place a groundwater management or allocation program. We have a grower-facing interface, our groundwater accounting platform, where they can see and manage how much groundwater they're using and what their fees are, and evaluate different management options so that they can see how to manage their fees in a way that best suits their business. And so we have our MLRP, our land fallowing program, we have our well mitigation program, and we have to develop rules and regulations for all of this. So this is why I'm out of breath all the time. So what you see in the lower graph is the red line is stepwise decreases in groundwater demand that are funded by the upper graph, which is our fee program, and the two should line up. So in theory, it looks really good right now. So challenging economics, I'm not going to go into details on this. So this is yield per acre for almonds, and price per pound. What you see there in the red, of course, is loss. What you see in the green is profit. And this is the reason we don't have numbers here is because you know your numbers better than we do. But we, I think, can agree that we're on the edge. And asking people to pump less groundwater and charging them for the privilege of doing it is going to push some over the edge. And so we're trying to use a very careful and balanced approach that's realistic, that allows you to readjust to the new reality. Our MLRP strategy looks at various different possibilities, and we've done some mapping to allow people to visualize what they can do on their properties. We have things like orchard swale rewilding, where, the orchard swales in our area tend to be waterlogged and unproductive. So paying people an incentive to take them out of production, for example, is one of our programs. Floodplain reconnection, floodwater dispersal, rotational fallowing. So when you take an orchard block out, not replanting it for several years. And then cover cropping and recropping. We're not saying no to anything at this point, but it's those kinds of integrated things that we want to focus on. So, and this just shows, this is some mapping that we've done that shows and allows people to visualize what's possible on their land, so that they can work with the resource conservation districts to come forward with a proposal that we can score and then submit for funding under funding contracts in an active agricultural operation. We're also looking at the water budget benefits of winter cover cropping. I'm not going to go into detail. That's a complicated topic, and the water quality and water quantity benefits, other benefits, depend on how you practice it. But what we'd like to do is we'd like to offer folks an incentive for implementing these kinds of potentially water smart practices. We're not going to require it, but it's something that we want to recognize and incentivize. We do that by first defining cover cropping And this will be available, the PDF will be available if you want to look at the details. At applying an adjustment factor to effective precipitation, in other words, how much of your water demand is met by precipitation versus by groundwater pumping. And then requiring cover cropping in our MLRP programs. And we're defining cover cropping very broadly, including using resident vegetation. And our incentive payment approach, you can see here, these are still draft numbers, but fallowing with beneficial cover cropping at $730 per acre per year, orchard swale rewilding at $1,040 per acre per year, and we have numbers that we've developed for recharge and retention basins and other practices. And I'm just going to skip this because I've already taken too long, but so basically what we have is a fee calculator that allows you to see what your fee would be with different land management practices implemented. And allocations apply to whole parcels. Groundwater use is measured only in fields. So when you take a field out of production, you can make a lot of your fees go away. And that's it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think that's a really good example of ways to implement various different practices in your operations, continue to farm and meet the goals. Now we have Anya.
Thanks, everybody. Sounds like you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, my name is Anya Radaba. I am the CEO of Western United Dairies. We are the largest dairy trade association in the world, voluntary trade association, and there are less than 1,000 dairies left in California. I have the privilege to stand in front of you and say that I represent 847 of those. So it is my honor to be here, and we couldn't get very far without you. Before I forget, my farmers made sure I told you all to keep the twigs out of the shells. So my clicker, I'm here to talk about some of the demand reduction, and I would love to see your numbers because it's all about numbers, isn't it? When you want to incentivize something, it's really about the right ROI and making sure that it tickles all of you where you're thinking about ROI in the future. And LandFlex was developed by the Department of Water Resources, but conceived by farmers. And if you think that I didn't start by thinking it was just going to be a dairy program, think again. But very soon, we realized we needed almonds, we needed orchards, and we needed vines to be part of the total SGMA solution. Because SGMA is not about acres fallowed, it's about the water. You all know you can fallow 100,000 acres in here and give me hardly any water back. Look at Imperial. So it's about the water, calculating and turning up or down incentives that reflect what the policy priorities of Californians are. Protecting wells, protecting domestic supplies, preventing subsidence, and making sure that we have a much more balanced groundwater budget are all the priorities of the legislature and several governors. I'd like to point out that Mike started with a story about Governor Jerry Brown. That was really unique at the time because he was the leader of the largest democratically led state, the leader of a Democratic supermajority in the United States, and having his opinion sway water users across California really made a difference. So finding the right partners is a huge challenge, but it's also something that is moving the needle today. So as we think about LandFlex, we think about the fact that it was a voluntary pilot program, again, conceived by DWR. We really developed a program that could tackle drought in 2022. And right as we were about to issue contracts, there was an enormous flood in 2023, probably something that I'll never see the likes of again in my life. And so we had to flip the program in a minute, and that's what we did to achieve climate resiliency in the valley. The Department of Water Resources awarded $25 million to different groundwater sustainability agencies to work with affected growers through 6 critically overdrafted basins. The idea was that temporarily fallowing lands to provide immediate benefits to vulnerable domestic wells, but what we ended up and got was a much bigger picture. Essentially designed to combat drought conditions, the program demonstrated remarkable versatility by then providing local flood protection and identifying areas of active recharge potential during critical wet years. We were able to demonstrate the versatility using measurable results. It was a practical tool for the protection of vulnerable drinking water wells and systems and land subsidence. It was an innovative solution to eliminate groundwater overdraft and achieve immediate SGMA compliance through the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And finally, we were able to develop long-term groundwater recharge capabilities throughout the valley and provide real-time flood control and protection of property. As we look at it being a tool for SGMA compliance, LandFlex accelerated that compliance. Anyone who enrolled ground was required to give up all of their transition water overnight. And that helped growers plan ahead, and it also aligned with the state's sustainability goals. LandFlex called for the immediate and permanent cessation of groundwater overdraft on enrolled lands. This ensured long-term groundwater sustainability and continued resilience in the state's resources and infrastructure. As we looked ahead and looked at this multifaceted tool that we have, we were able to protect critical infrastructure by preventing additional subsidence on lands near the California Aqueduct and the Frankfurt Canal. We enhanced water conveyance systems by protecting public and private drinking water supplies. Phase 1, there were just over 1,000 acres that enrolled, and the state spent $6.5 million there. You can see the 3 participating GSAs, Greater Kauai, Eastern Tule, and Madera. Phase 2, we enrolled just over 3,200 acres for a total of just over $16.7 million. The participating GSAs were Lower Tule, Pixley, and Westlands. All 6 of these GSAs were critically overdrafted, and all 6 got hit with some of the biggest floods that I'd seen in a really long time. So it was, I'm not going to say it was convenient, but it certainly gave us an opportunity to flex that muscle. In less than a year, LandFlex has saved more water than any other SGMA program. We immediately saved aquifer savings by fallowing ground just over 13,000 acre feet. We permanently retired over 63,000 acre feet of overdraft. We placed a lien on those properties, and they have no overdraft capacity in the future. We also protected key flood-prone communities and water recharge by saving 22,471 acre feet. So the program has proven climate adaptability. In addition, and this was the program's original purpose, we saved over 16,500 domestic wells in these 6 critically overdrafted basins. So some of the key takeaways: groundwater is infrastructure. This is an important talking point. It's under our feet. It definitely protects the aquifers that it lives in, but it is infrastructure. It is subsidence and aqueduct prevention. That's what we did with LandFlex. We managed some aquifer recharge, and we also were able to expand the scope using DWR's vision that addresses drought, groundwater sustainability, subsidence, and active recharge. It was a multi-benefit approach that balances water source protection and sustainable agriculture. But my favorite part is that it keeps working lands in production. Keeping working lands in a SGMA process is the key takeaway here. We're not going to get very far if we don't keep these lands in production and keep them working. The tax base shrinks, all of you will be severely impacted, and more importantly, you won't be motivated to get into the incentive arrangements. So, SGMA compliance, this drove the climate conscious actions through flexible land management, and it was a collaborative approach. It combines the voluntary efforts of farmers in a room like this, using innovative strategies to deliver measurable results. It was a key DWR initiative. It was critical for drought protection at the time, but ended up providing a tremendous amount of climate resilience. It was also very cost effective. At just under $230 per acre foot, this is one of the most expensive initiative programs ever run. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Anya. And then we'll invite Joe up to talk about groundwater recharge. So that was a perfect segue.
Hello, everyone. My name's Joe Chaparena, and I'm the Project Director of Water Resources for Sustainable Conservation. I want to thank Michael and ABC for the Almond Board of California for inviting me to speak today. We've actually been partnered with the Almond Board for 6, 7, 8 consecutive years now on a lot of groundwater recharge work, but also other initiatives also. And ABC has funded a lot of research from UC Davis researchers to look at how groundwater recharge, and in particular on-farm recharge being done on their focus is obviously on almond orchards. And we've worked broadly in this area really back since 2011, well before SGMA. And so anyways, Almond Board is very supportive of almond growers in doing recharge, particularly during dormancy, if there's floodwaters available during that time when the trees are dormant and there's less risk. But as you'll see through this presentation, there's definitely other growers who do this well into the growing season. So I'm going to talk about groundwater recharge incentives, strategies, and recharge methods. So the methods is examples of how growers have implemented recharge on their fields. One difference about the incentives that I'm going to be presenting on today than what Mike and Anya presented on were those are publicly funded incentives for recharge and for demand reduction, groundwater demand pumping reduction. Everything I'm going to be talking about today is all privately funded through water districts, groundwater sustainability agencies primarily. So this was a project that was funded through the Department of Water Resource through a contract we had with them along with other tasks. And this was back in the 2022-23 water year where we went through and interviewed and surveyed a lot of different water districts, so irrigation districts, water storage districts, and also groundwater sustainability agencies to see what types of incentives they were offering to their growers and landowners to implement recharge on their property. And as you can see, this was just in the San Joaquin Valley, and the further south you get in the San Joaquin Valley where there's greater overdraft of the subbasins, less water available, and more intensive agricultural cropping systems, you see more incentives being offered. And in the next few slides, I'm going to touch on about 4 of these different strategies, but they're everything from reduced water cost for water available for recharge, fallowing leases, very similar to Landflex that Anya just spoke about, subsurface recharge systems, and groundwater pumping credits, and others. So the Public Policy Institute of California, their Water Policy Center, in 2017 and in 2023, they did very comprehensive surveys of water districts in the San Joaquin Valley. And one of the key takeaways of that survey, of those surveys, is that where there are financial incentives, you see more landowners and growers implementing recharge and doing recharge on their farms and water districts in general. And so that's a key driver, and especially groundwater pumping credits, where you can increase your groundwater pumping allocation, so basically a cap of how much water you can pump per acre. Some districts have already developed ability to increase those allocations by recharging on your property. In particular, Tulare Irrigation District is one water district in particular who has had groundwater recharge programs since 2017, 2019, and 2023. And in 2023, when they offered this increased pumping allocation, they really saw a huge increase in the number of growers doing recharge in their district. So reduced costs for water, for recharge water is just what it sounds like. Districts who are still paying the Bureau of Reclamation for that water, and they're still incurring costs for their ditch tenders and their staff to manage water, but those boards offered water for free or at a reduced rate to encourage landowners to take that water and to do recharge. And so these are the subbasins where districts offered this particular incentive. And fallowing leases. So again, very similar to land flex, where growers, boards of directors of water districts offered, and GSAs offered incentive payments to basically fallow fields to not have that additional groundwater pumping. And in some cases, water districts like the North Kern Water Storage District, they paired these fallowing leases with putting berms up around the fields and being able to use those fields for recharge. So basically small recharge basins or spreading ponds. Subsurface recharge is basically reverse tile drain. So tile drains, perforated piping about 10 feet underground below the root zone of crops, which historically have been used to keep water levels down. There are a few companies that are developing these. About a year ago, there was at least 30 of these systems in California. I'm sure there's more now. It's a more costly system, but you're able to basically run surface water, flood release water through your sand media filters as you would to irrigate through drip or microjet, but run it below ground underneath the root zone. So you're reducing the amount of moisture in the root zone. You're not pushing nutrients and other inputs below the root zone, which has groundwater quality concerns, as well as just wasting inputs that growers are paying to put into the soil. So in Kern County, there were a few districts offering cost share programs to offset the cost of those systems. And groundwater pumping credits, as I mentioned earlier, the Tulare ID example. The thing with groundwater pumping credits, and again, it's a huge intake or uptake and a motivator for growers to do this, but you do have to have a groundwater pumping allocation in order to be able to have a credit to really increase how much water you're able to pump. But again, huge benefits to this strategy. Now I'm going to get into, again, the recharge methods. So how growers have implemented on-farm recharge on their almond orchards or vineyards or even annual cropland, and in some cases, other alternative forms of recharge on private lands. And these are two documents that we developed. What I just described, the incentives, that's a guidance document that we developed summarizing those. And these are two other documents that on the last slide of this presentation, there's a QR code and a link to our technical resources page where you could access these documents. And those were also funded through a DWR contract. So on-farm recharge, as I mentioned earlier, the most ideal time would be during dormancy if you have a permanent crop like an almond orchard. Again, less risk to your crop health and or yields, but a lot of growers also will do this well into the growing season, and so there's on-farm recharge that can be done in the growing season, which is where with hydrographs, when you see snow melt from the Sierra, that really extends well beyond dormancy and into the growing season. So there's also in lieu recharge, where growers who are irrigating their crops with surface water in lieu of groundwater pumping. And in some cases, you can get credits and benefits from that also. You've probably seen a lot of photos of on-farm recharge that have been very aggressive examples where growers are doing this with much, a couple feet of water fully surrounding the trunk of their trees or vines. But this also can be done in much more conservative ways. The photo on the right, which looks like just a flood irrigation system on an orchard, is actually an on-farm recharge example where you're applying water in excess of the crop's evapotranspiration and the crop's water demand, and still able to recharge the aquifer. And the photo on the left is a grower down in the Kings River Basin and Consolidated Irrigation District that does alternative row irrigation, where they apply water to every other row so they can still get in, prune, do their cultural practices, and also leave more kind of oxygen in the root zone to reduce those risks as well. This schematic is, so alternative recharge examples, as I mentioned earlier, the subterranean or reverse child drain, which is the schematic on the left from Lidco, one of the leading companies that installs these, but also micro basins, so dedicated recharge basins that are on private property, either existing ponds or growers that have taken some land out of production or had some open ground and developed their own recharge basins. And those also have other benefits too, like sediment control and surface runoff. Kind of in an ideal situation, growers who have dual irrigation systems where they still have the ability to flood irrigate their fields during wet years, where there's surface water available for recharge or even just to irrigate. And there's a lot of agronomic benefits associated with flood irrigation as well, but like pushing salts below the root zone, rodent control. So having that flexibility and maintaining either legacy flood irrigation systems is critical. And also with pressurized drip or microjet to be able to conserve water on those dry years and all the other benefits associated with that, also of really precise nutrient application. The photo on the right is a system which is a pressurized system for surface water. So being able to use surface water through your drip and microjet systems. So really just kind of having flexibility of managing water on your fields has a lot of benefits, not just for agronomics, but also for recharge and water conservation. These are photos of fields that did not have legacy flood irrigation systems or just flood irrigation systems in general, and utilizing, rental pumps, mobile pumps, lay flat pipe to quickly deliver flood release water to fields for recharge. And also, as Mike touched upon with the Department of Conservation's multi-benefit land repurposing program, in general, recharge and water delivery for multi-benefit purposes is really a key priority in the kind of regulatory framework and scope that we're in today. And water can be conveyed and prioritized to particular parcels or areas to have benefits to subsidence or domestic and community wells that are threatened or already dry, and also for multi-benefit or habitat-friendly recharge basins, which is that photo on the right or on the bottom, which is a habitat-friendly dedicated recharge basin in Madera County. And so that's the QR code and also the link to our technical resources page where you can get access to a lot of different documents, including the 3 that I referenced today. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe. Now we'll have Brett come up, who's our grower, and kind of put this in a lot of these things into perspective for all of the growers in the audience.
Well, thank you. It's good to see so many people out here coming out to support the Almond Board, and thank you, Michael, for having a great panel of speakers today. I'm Brett Sill. I am a fourth-generation grower out of Bakersfield, California, and here to talk about a few things that we are doing on our farm and just some things that you might be able to do on your farm. And so, kind of one of the first things that we did several years ago was taking out these orchards and just rotating those crops into different crops. We're lucky enough in Kern County to have a lot of carrot companies and garlic and potatoes, and so we're able just to rotate those orchards out. If you're in a good water district and you have the water, these are some good options to do. You can contract to grow with these companies, and it's a safe place to rotate some of the crops and just benefit your soil there. Some other things that we've done on our grounds is we started really getting into planting cover crops and building that organic matter in the soil. And so that being a transition as we go into and get ready to plant a new orchard. And so, and what are some of those benefits of the cover crops? Are just, you're improving that carbon in your soil. And what I found is that when we're putting carbon in our soil, we're doing really good. It's really building that soil health. It's giving that ground, some new minerals that it really needs, and it's just a good way to add back to your soil. Some of the things that we had to learn too is that you have to know when you want to terminate. We had all these sunflowers out there, and they look beautiful and all that stuff, but we let it go to seed, and then when we came into a garlic crop, we had some issues with that. So. Know when to terminate that crop, especially knowing what you're going to go back into. If you're going back into almonds, probably not that big of a deal. But if you're going to go into a crash crop like, potatoes or carrots or garlic or one of those things, you want to make sure that you probably terminate those cover crops before they go to seed. What else we do when we removed an orchard is, reincorporating the wood chips. There's a lot of programs out there with the Air Board or NRCS to get some of those monies to put that in there, and that's also going to really help that soil out and put a lot of carbon back in it as well. Some things to know when you're incorporating those chips, and especially if you're going to go into a cash crop, is that those wood chips will hold a lot of those minerals and tie up a lot of those minerals in the soil. And so I think the best thing to do is go in with a cover crop right after, because it's not something that you're really trying to make money on. You're trying to improve the soil, give it a little bit of nitrogen to help release some of that nitrogen and some of those minerals from the wood chips, and allow then those cover crops to grow and just build some really good soil health. And so and some of the things that we've done is we brought in sheep. We brought in sheep to graze those cover crops, and it just helps cycle those nutrients and to really build up the soil health. And so one of the things that we just signed up for is a carbon program, and that's something that I am super excited about. I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in some of those challenge irrigation districts and some of those where you don't have the water. So this is a great opportunity where you can, sign up for these carbon programs, and so what you want to do, if like when we're taking out an almond orchard, you want to get the soil tested, especially for the organic carbon material, and they can go back a couple years before you even sign that up. And so we're getting tests back a couple years now of what our organic matter was. And right now we started in our almonds. And so, we had organic material, percent of like 0.5% to 8%. We've increased that by growing cover crops and adding compost and biochar to some ranches over 2% in just 2 years. And so that is, I'm really excited about that, because as you know, for every percent of organic matter you have in your soils, that's 20,000 gallons of water. So we're super excited about that and how we can continue to build that organic matter in our existing almond orchards. And so,
if you're going to, just take out an orchard and you're just going to leave it fallow or whatever, so you can, what you want to do is get that soil tested and then, plant a cover crop. It's going to cost you $50, $75 an acre to do that, to water it up and get it. But the good thing is if you let that go to seed, then you can, that will reseed the next year. And so you want to knock it down, let it go to seed, and then you can, not have to plant one the next year and continue to build that carbon, because as more percent of carbon you get, then you're going to be earning more credits. And as those roots go deeper and deeper into the soil, you can start hitting different stratospheres. And as the years come, you can start testing your carbon down there to get, more credits in the program. And so, and some other things that you can do with that as well is if you're near a dairy or anything like that, you can harvest some of that seed. We did one year where we grew our own oats and wheats, and we didn't water it. We just let it go. I mean, we watered it to get it up, and then we just kind of let the rains, come and do it, which we were lucky in 22 and 23 to have, good rains. But then we were able to harvest some of that seed to pay for some of that cover crops and then sell it to a dairy. So, there's opportunities to do that to get a return, on your investment on the cover crops. So, and then I think, a big thing is grazing. It's always cool to see little lambs being lambed out on your field, but it really does a lot. I've seen our tests, especially in our alfalfa, like the TDNs and the protein, that these dairies want really high protein, milk hay. We've seen some great tests on our first couple cuttings, and even my dad was all, man, I've never seen us, have tests like that before. And he's all, do you think those sheep have something to do with it? I think so, maybe. So, and then also, putting into a fallowing program. We were lucky enough our irrigation district actually had a fallowing program, and we put some lands into a fallowing program, and then you never know what's really going to happen. So this last year, we actually were approached to, have a concert on our ranch, and so we just actually signed a contract. So Luke Bryan is coming to Shafter, California to play his farm tour on Sill Properties Ranch, and so we're really excited about that. They're going to actually pay us to grow a cover crop on it, and and he's going to come out and play. And so, May 17th, you guys aren't doing anything, come on down to Shafter and see Luke Bryan. And hey, we get paid a couple $100s to do it. So, so you never know when you put something in a fallowing program what opportunities might come along. I'd say one of the things that you really should do and pay attention is work with your irrigation districts and your GSA. Find out what they have. Doing that, we were able to sign up for a recharge program during those heavy winters during 22 and 23. And we took an orchard out. We just basically, there's other companies around town that were building big berms and spent a lot of money like that. But we said, hey, let's just treat this like we're growing wheat. And we bordered it up, flooded it out, and we were able to recharge some water. And that's just working with your irrigation districts, working with your GSAs, getting involved in your local community to know what's going on. And so I just say, just pay attention to what's going on and just look for different opportunities, and you never know what's going to happen.
Awesome. Thank you. So we still have some time for questions too, so definitely make sure you guys stick around for that. I just wanted to thank the panelists. Thank you guys all for being here. I really like to see as all the panelists start talking and how they really kind of flow together, and really with Brett kind of closing that out of really reaching out to service providers, to irrigation districts, to GSAs. So we will move into, I also want to mention the incentive zone right outside of this room. There's tables lined up along the glass walls by the escalator. Please reach out to those, to NRCSs there. They have money to do recharge. They have money to plant cover crops, all of these practices. There's companies that have money to pay you for these practices, as well as the programs that were talked about today. So please stop by the incentive zone. I also have a favor too. I have a slide up here. I'm going to leave this up as we go into questions. But this is kind of going back to Brett's point of just some questions around groundwater recharge, your communication with your irrigation districts. We always appreciate feedback. So as we go through questions, if you guys want, or after the session, scan that QR code and it'll be a short 5-minute survey that I'd appreciate if you guys could fill that out. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to my speakers. This was a wonderful panel, and I hope you guys all take this information back and really think about your operations going forward into the future.